Welcome to the Learn to Hack It Top 5 Salesforce Hacks webinar. This will be the most exciting 1 hour of your Thursday, I promise you. So let's get going here. Introduce myself. My name is Mike Gerholdt. I am a Salesforce admin evangelist. You can follow me on Twitter. I am at Mike Gerholdt. There's a whole lot of consonants at the end, so it's LDT. And of course, if you want to email me, you can email me at mgerholdt@salesforce.com. If you are on Twitter, you might as well tweet to your friends using the hashtag ForceWebinar and let them be jealous that you are missing out on some great content that they will see perhaps later. So, for those of you that have not attended a webinar or not been to Dreamforce or not seen the Salesforce presentation, this is the safe harbor slide, which basically means do not make any purchasing decisions based on forward-looking statements. I will try not to make any forward-looking statements and only show you everything that is awesome about the platform. You can read this entire safe harbor slide by going to salesforce.com and searching on safe harbor, and then that way you can get up to date. Of course, we are social, so you can follow at Salesforce Devs and Twitter and use the hashtag ForceWebinar. If you want to tweet that out, let your friends know you're on a webinar. Also, you can use the hashtag AwesomeAdmin. Salesforce Developers are on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and Google+. We are everywhere, and I want to remind you that, of course, this webinar is being recorded, so if you miss out on any part of it, you can check it out later. We will have that recording posted to YouTube and use the same URL as the registration. Questions. We have a panel of experts ready to answer your questions. So, a little bit about question etiquette. Please don't wait until the end to ask your question. If a question pops in your head, we have a question window you can ask it. We have technical people who are sitting by, can answer your question right away. We would ask that you respect the Q&A etiquette, i.e., please try not to repeat any questions. The support team is going to do their best to get through the queue, and repeating questions just helps everybody. Stick around. I'm going to do some live Q&A at the end, so if you want to try and stump me, that's the best chance you'll have. And of course, if you have more questions, you can always head to the developer forum, which is developer.salesforce.com/forums. All right, so our agenda for today, we are going to cover 5 easy Salesforce hacks. I'm going to give you the recipe for each hack, and then we're going to dive into each hack and do a demo. So we're going to do that 5 times over, and then at the end, depending on the time that we have left, I'm going to do some Q&A. And of course, as we just talked about, don't hesitate to the end to ask your questions. Experts are standing by. So real quickly, why Salesforce? Traditional platforms, you can go from idea and maybe in 6 to 12 months deploy it. With the Salesforce platform, you can go from idea to app in a relatively short amount of time. A couple of the topics or terms that might come up and I might use during this webinar. So programmatic and declarative. Programmatic developers are wonderful people who develop and deploy code such as Apex code on the Force.com platform or on Heroku. They're very well versed with APIs and frameworks, and they love to write code. Of course, Salesforce is also very friendly for the declarative developer, and those are people who are familiar with adding fields and design layouts and really the point and click, right? So drag and drop reports and dashboards. Salesforce is incredibly friendly towards the declarative developer. So we've got a little bit of both. We're going to focus heavily on the declarative developer for this webinar. And where are we? There we are. All right, so let's talk about the hacks that we're going to cover. The first hack we're going to cover is convert a lead without creating an opportunity. And the second one we're going to dive into is how we can morph page layouts based on opportunity stage. And then, of course, we've got a one-click left voicemail button. So anybody who is in inside sales or does a lot of sales calls is going to love this hack. And then our last two, we're going to utilize something called global variables. So we're going to use a global variable to create a custom list view that a Salesforce admin or developer can deploy to all of their users. And then we're going to use that same global variable and run a report on records last modified by a running user. So that's going to be really cool. All right, so let's get into our first hack. I think before we get started, if you have a Salesforce developer account or a sandbox and you kind of want to follow along with what we're doing, I'm going to do my best to pace this out so we get through those 5 hacks within our time frame. But it's kind of fun if you're in your sandbox or in your developer environment and you want to try these out as we go. That's great, and then maybe leads to more questions. So our first hack is we're going to convert a lead without creating an opportunity. So let's talk through maybe what the business case would be for this. And the business case would be if you have a product where multiple people inquire as a lead, and maybe you have a sales team or an inside sales team, and they need to convert all those leads to an account and a contact, but not create an opportunity upon conversion. So this could happen a lot where those people inquire, and the salesperson forgets to check the box, and thus creates 5 or 6 opportunities on an account, which could really mess up your forecasting or mess up their expected revenue. So what's our hack recipe? Our hack recipe is we're going to create a detail page button on the lead object, and we're going to use the following button URL. Now the really cool thing here is that lead URL, if you want, I can tweet that out and we'll send it to you. I'm going to show you how we're going to actually rebuild this entire URL. Most important part is the and no opti equals 1 at the end. So Salesforce is actually going to give us this entire URL. All we need to remember is and no opti equals 1. So if we look at what happens on a traditional convert, right? We convert the lead without an opportunity. When we press the convert button in Salesforce, it generally creates an account and an opportunity. What we're going to do with this hack is we're going to take out that opportunity creation so that the salesperson could create the opportunity after the account has already been created, and then that way they can convert a whole bunch of leads to one account. So with that said, this is the best part. Let's dive into the demo. So let me just switch screens here real quick. All right. So here I'm logged into my Salesforce developer account, and I'm on my home tab. And let's first just kind of take a look at what happens when we do the traditional convert on a lead. So I'm going to click on my leads tab, and I'm going to go down to my most recent lead, which is Kristen. And Kristen has been contacted, and she's ready to move on into the buying cycle. So I'm going to use the standard convert button and click convert. Now here we can see that the do not create new opportunity checkbox is not checked, right? Which means that it's going to actually create an opportunity. And if I told you, if you remember earlier, I told you on that slide, Salesforce gives us this entire URL. All we have to do is remember the and no opti part. So if you look at my URL, we're actually going to grab everything behind the salesforce.com part and just copy that because we're going to use it later. So let's create that custom button. To do that, I click on Setup, and I scroll down under Build and click Customize and Leads, because this is going to be a button that lives on our lead object. And I'm going to click Button Links and Actions. Now, for the purposes of the webinar, I went ahead and created this, but I'm going to show you how we recreate this, right? So I'm going to click Edit, and I called my button Convert Without Opportunity. That way, if you chose to have both buttons on your page, you would know which one's going to convert this lead with opportunities and which one's going to create without an opportunity. And if you can see it's up to the point that it's %2F, and if you notice, this part is actually the lead ID. So the beautiful thing is Salesforce gives us merge fields. So what we can do is grab the lead ID merge field right here and pop it in. And you see Salesforce is going to ask for it again. So we're going to put the lead ID merge field in again. If you notice, we're really close to having our URL hack, right? So we didn't have to remember this really long URL because Salesforce gave us everything. So from there, we can just type in and no opti equals 1. And you'll notice that my formula URL is the same as the one that was shown on the formula slide. So I am actually going to delete that second one because we only need one URL. We only need one URL to make this button work. So this is the URL we're going to use. And if we scroll down, we want to make sure we check our syntax on this. So I'm just going to press the button, check syntax, and I got it, the green, which is great. No syntax errors in merge field functions, right? So we're all set on this. Detail page button, I'm going to click Save. And of course, whenever you create a custom button, you want to add that to your page layout. Otherwise, you've created a custom button, but nobody can find it. So I've already done that. And let's go back to our Leads tab. And let's go back to the Kristen lead that I was on before. So here you can see I added the button to the page layout. And this time, I'm going to click it. And let's see if that box is checked. So when I click that box, you can see the box now is checked. Do not create a new opportunity upon conversion. And if we look, the URL includes the and no opti equals 1. So if we go back, let's just kind of review what we did. I'm going to start back at the Kristen lead. Here's Kristen as a lead. And the traditional convert button, when we click it, the standard one that Salesforce gives us, will actually not check the box, do not create new opportunity, which means that a new opportunity would be created. And since our business case says, well, we need to make sure that a new opportunity is not created, we create a custom button. And we called that custom button convert without opportunity. So when I click that, we actually see that this box is checked, do not create a new opportunity upon conversion. And if we look in the URL, we dynamically filled in the Salesforce lead URL, which was required. And then we just appended that URL with and no opti equals 1. All right, so that is converting a lead without creating an opportunity. Now I'll jump back into PowerPoint here. It's always fun, juggling back and forth between. All right, so our second hack is a little bit more involved, and it's actually morphing page layouts on opportunities. So the business case here is that based on the stage of the opportunity, relevant fields should appear at the top and all other fields should be read-only. Now, if you were part of the Flow webinar the previous week, a couple weeks ago, you know that Flow can handle this because Flow can do screens. And we're not going to do that. We're actually going to create record types and page layouts and then use workflows. So let's look at what our hack recipe is. So our hack recipe for this is we're actually going to create a record type and a page layout for each of the sales stages that we have. And then what we're going to do is create a workflow rule to change that record type based on the stage. So let's go in and we'll look at what our sales stages are. I'll show you the record types that created, the page layouts that are associated to those, and then the workflows that power them. So I'll start again at my Salesforce home screen, and this time I'm actually going to first just dive in to setup, and we're going to take a look at what our sales stages are, right? So I'm going to click on setup, and then under build, I'm going to click customize, and I'm going to scroll down to opportunities, and then under fields. And here we can see stage. So this would be where you have your opportunity stages, right? I use the default ones that came with my Salesforce Developer org. So we have prospecting, we have qualification, needs analysis, value proposition, ID decision makers, perception analysis, proposal price quote, negotiation review, and then our two closed stages, which could be either closed won or closed lost. So we have quite a few sales stages. So in our hack recipe, we know we need to create a record type for each of these pick list values. And of course, the reason we create record types is two reasons. So one, we can serve up different page layouts, which helps us meet our business case. And the second one is so that we can also edit any pick list values. So here for opportunity record types, you can see that my record types match the same as what my sales stages were. So I have all the way from proposal and prospecting through closed won and closed lost. Now for each of those record types, I also create a page layout. And we can go in and look at page layouts right under opportunities. And I name them the same. You'll also notice there's a few extra in here that came with my developer org, right? We're not going to use those. We're just going to use the ones that are named the same as our sales stages. So we have record types that mirror our sales stages. We have page layouts that mirror our sales stages. And we'll also create workflows that mirror our sales stages. So let's go in and actually look at what one of those record types looks like. So here's qualification. I'm just going to click Edit next to it. And because this hack took a little bit longer to set up, I went ahead and set these page layouts up in advance. So here we can see that qualification is actually the second stage, right? So prospecting is below it, and then qualification is above it. We've got the little lockbox that shows that the prospecting field is actually locked, right? That was part of our business case, which was as the salesperson moves through the sales stages, they want to make sure that the previous stage field is locked. So in this case, once we're at the qualification stage, the prospecting field is locked. And if I look at a later stage, let's say closed won, and scroll down, we'll actually see that all of our sales stages here are represented, right? So we've got prospecting all the way through negotiation, and then of course, if it's closed won, I added back in some delivery status fields and order tracking. Now all of these record type changes are going to be powered through a workflow. So let's take a look at all of the workflows we created, and then we'll see this in action. So in the same menu, we're just going to click on Create, and Workflow and Approval, and Workflow Rules. And here I just get a little list view that shows me my opportunity workflow rules. As a best practice, what I did was I named them with a number so that I knew what order all of the sales stages happened in, right? So we start with prospecting, and we move all the way through to negotiation, and I call that 1 through 8. And since we really have two closed sales stages, I just called closed won as 9 and closed lost as 9B. So let's go ahead and pop into one of those workflows. So creating a workflow, we had to set our criteria. So I used the criteria opportunity stage equals qualification, right? The changing of the stage is the trigger that will actually fire the workflow and change that record type. So our criteria is opportunity stage equals qualification. Let's look at the action. Our action is going to be a field update, and we're going to set the record type to qualification, which is what we called the record type previously. So our object is opportunity. Our field to update is opportunity record type, and it's going to be set to qualification. And then that way everybody will see the page layout. All right, so a whole bunch of mechanics there. Let's look at what happens when we dive into our opportunities and we actually change a page layout, or we actually change the sales stage, and let's see if the page layouts change. So here I am in an opportunity that's at closed lost, right? We lost this opportunity, and we can see all of the sales stages here represented. So let's create a new opportunity. And I'll call this test opportunity 2. And I'll set the stage at prospecting because I'm just getting started. And I'll set the close date as the 28th. And I'll click Save. So here we can see all the salesperson is served up is some prospecting information. It looks like the business need to currently describe what their needs are. So you could fill in some text here. and click Save. So we're still at the prospecting stage. As a salesperson, I've filled in what their need is, and I'm ready to move on. So I'm going to change that stage to qualification, and our page layout should change. And click Save. And there we go. It looks like prospecting moved down, and now our qualification stage requirement is, do they have a budget? So I think this one's a pick list value, and I'm going to say, you bet they've got budget. So I'm going to click Save again, and now I'm ready to move on to my next stage, and it looks like my next stage is needs analysis. When I click Save, qualification will move down, and prospecting down, and needs analysis. So now I could describe maybe some of their current needs. So you can see as the salesperson goes through this opportunity and advances the stages, fields just appear for them almost automatically, which is really cool. So that meets our business requirements. All right. 2 hacks down, having a good time. It's Friday Eve. Let's get to the fun one. So this one's where you get to be a superhero to your inside sales team or your call center team, especially to a lot of people that make a lot of phone calls and maybe get a lot of voicemails every day but still need to log their activities. So our business case for the left voicemail button is that users should be able to easily log that they left a voicemail for a lead or a contact and have a reminder to call them back 2 days later. This one's a little bit of a shout out to Salesforce MVP Amber Neal, who saved me with this hack recipe when I was a Salesforce admin. So our recipe here is a little bit longer. We're actually going to take some field values and field IDs and pass them through in a URL. So we're going to create a custom detail page, and we're going to use the following URL. And I know you want this URL, so we'll absolutely post it with the recording, and we'll get that sent out to you. So the URL is basically that we're going to create a follow-up, and we're going to title it call. We're going to pass the lead ID through. We're going to pass the lead company through, and then we're going to fill in some text that says I left a voicemail, who I left the voicemail for, and then we're going to create a follow-up task that reminds them to call the person back in 2 days. So as an admin or developer, you would want to find out what's the ideal time frame that people want to be called back. Is it 2 days? Is it 3 days? Is it 4 days? Is it 5 days? And this literally just takes the value today, so whatever today is, and then adds 2 to it. So unfortunately, it's really good, this button, if you press it on Monday, because it'll remind you to call somebody back on Wednesday. If you press it on a Thursday, it's going to remind you to call them back on a Saturday, but that's okay. So let's look at what some of those task IDs are. So this is a great cheat sheet that I put together from a Tumblr post from a Salesforce community member. And we can see the assign to, we actually get a task ID, TSK1, subject, the ID is TSK5. So what I'm trying to do here is just unravel the mystery of what's behind that URL. The due date is actually TSK4 for an ID, and then our comments are going to be TSK6, right? So we'll put all this together for you because this URL is really cool for your users. It just takes a minute to put together. So let's take a look at it. One click left voicemail button. Let me jump over here. And I'm actually going to create this button on my lead. So let's jump into the setup menu. So from leads, I'm just going to click setup. And I'm going to scroll down under build and click customize and leads. And since it's a custom button, I'm just going to click buttons, links, and actions. And here I've created it, but we'll walk through the entire URL again. So create a new custom button. I called it left voicemail. you can label it how you wish. I used detail page button as the display type, so it's going to sit up there in the top bar next to create and edit and that custom convert without opportunity button that we created 2 hacks ago. Our behavior is display an existing window without sidebar or header, right? And then our content source is a URL, which is this big URL. So if you recall from our IDs, we're pulling in lead ID here, which is a field we can grab dynamically, and the who ID, we need that, which is lead ID as well. Task 5, which is subject, we're actually going to put left plus voicemail. So because this is a URL hack, we can't put a space in. We actually need the plus sign so that it puts in left voicemail. If we put a space in, this URL wouldn't work. Task 6, TSK6, which is our field ID for comments, we're going to put in the following text. Left plus A plus voicemail plus 4 plus. And that way it'll say left a voicemail 4. And then dynamically we will just grab that, lead ID. So we'll pass that in, and it'll be lead name. So if it's Kristen or Susan, it'll say left a voicemail for Susan. And then task 5 is going to, TSK5 is our field ID for helping us do a follow-up, right? So we're real quick going to say follow-up plus VM, so follow-up to a voicemail with plus lead name. So that way it looks a little bit more dynamic. So follow-up voicemail with Kristen or Susan, whatever the lead name is, from, and then we're going to pull in company, right? So we have this as an available merge field here, and we just click on insert merge field. We can scroll down to lead company and insert that. And then, of course, TSK4 is our field ID for setting the date, right? So we want the date to be set for today plus 2, right? Because the business requirement was that they follow up in 2 days. Now, here's how we could change that. If they say the business requirement is we need to follow up in 5 days, then all you have to do is change the plus 2 to a 5. And now anybody who presses the button will get everything, lead left voicemail for, lead first name, lead company, and then the task follow-up will be 5 days later from the day that they press the button as opposed to 2. So you definitely want to pull your users and look at the business case for what the follow-up timeline should be. So I'm going to put this back at 2, and I'm going to click Save, and then let's see what happens when we press the button. Of course, just as a reminder, anytime you create a custom button, make sure you add that to the page layout, otherwise the users won't be able to utilize it. So let's go back to leads. I'm going to go back to my Kristen lead here again. And this time I called Kristen, and I need to update her on a sales call or an appointment, but unfortunately Kristen wasn't at her desk. I still want to get credit for the call, so I want to log that activity. So I want to make it easy, and I'm just going to press that left voicemail button that we created. So when I click the left voicemail button, you can see that everything's filled in for us, right? So our subject is left voicemail, and our comments are left voicemail for, and it filled in per the lead's name. And then our follow-up information was follow-up with Kristen Aiken, and you can see today is July 24th. And so I said I need to follow up 2 days later, and it's now July 26th. So everything looks good for me, so I'm just going to click Save. Now the opposite of that, if you didn't create the left voicemail button, of course you could always click the log a call. Unfortunately, you're presenting your users with just blank, so they would have to fill in left voicemail here, and then they'd have to type left to voicemail for Kristen. Right? So we're saving our users a few clicks, we're saving them typing, and then of course, what if they forgot to set that due date? Well, now we're making sure that it's set 2 days in advance. All right, so that's the left voicemail button. Scroll back to our presentation here. Get us going. All right, the last two hacks are really cool, right? Because we're actually going to use some global variables in Salesforce. And global variables are available to us for a lot of things. We're going to use them in formula fields. So our business case here is the executives are telling us that list views are becoming cluttered and they're not really unified, right? So we've all seen users create a lot of list views, and maybe they're in a meeting together and they can't seem to get the same list running. And so what the executives have asked us for are views that should be based on the running user. So to do that, let me advance this here. So to do that, we're actually going to use Salesforce Global Variables. And global variables reference general information about the current user or your organization. So a couple examples of those are $user.id, which we'll actually use, or $user.alias, right? So these are variables that can be stored either about your organization or about the user. So what's our hack recipe look like? Well, it's an if statement, and we'll definitely get this one tweeted out to you too because it's really cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to create one formula field either on the lead or on the contact. In this case, we're going to create it on the contact. And we're going to say if the user ID equals the created by ID, then we want Salesforce to write the word true. And if it's not, we want it to write the word false, right? So it's true and false. And then from that formula field, we can actually create a list view, and that list view will run dynamically. True and false. Of course, this field you could expose to your users. I chose to for the demo. If you do, make sure you explain to them what true and false means. So here we go. I'm going to log in as myself. So from my home page, I'm going to go to Contacts, and I'm going to click on All Contacts, and I just want to find a contact that I've created, right? So Tim Barr, I know him, I've created it, and let's see, oh, actually, I'm on the wrong tab. Nope. Tim Barr, I created. So Tim Barr, you can see I created him, and I last modified him, and I'm the account owner, which doesn't really reference into it. So when we go to create our formula field, this Tim Barr record should result in a true statement because I've created him. So let's look at creating that field. So if I click on Setup, and scroll down to Customize. This time I'm going to go to Accounts, and I'm going to click on Fields. And I'm going to create a field called I made this. So it's actually going to be a formula field. And I'll click on Next. And we'll call it I made this. And text. So the field name is I made this, and the result of the text string will be text. And click Next. So from there, I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint and grab that formula. And I'm going to put it in and then show you how we rebuilt it. So here's the formula we're going for. How do we build it if you couldn't copy it off of the slide like I did? The first thing we're going to do is go over to our functions, which is off to the right, and we're going to scroll down and we're going to look for our if statement. And the nice thing about when we click on a function is Salesforce tells us what the if statement should look like and what it does. So we definitely want that. So I'm going to click Insert, and now we know if. If, and we need a logical test. So our logical test, as you can see, will be user ID should equal created by ID, right? So we're going to scroll over logical test, and we want to insert a field And we know we're going to go to our user table and scroll down to user ID here and insert. So we've got part of it, user ID. We want to insert the operator equals. And then we want to pull in created by ID. So created by ID will actually be on the contact record. So insert, and we click contact, and it should be created by ID right here, and insert. So we've got the first part of our if statement done, which is the logical test. The logical test is if the user ID equals the created by ID, now we're going to say, well, what should it be if it's true? Value of true should be true. We put it in quotation marks so that Salesforce actually writes it. And value of false, we want false. And that's how we come to our formula. So I'm going to delete that second one. We only need one. Click next. And of course, I get that. True to form, when you're doing a demo, you always get an error. I believe I also rebuilt this field on leads. I last modified this. Hey, here's what happens when the demo fails. I made this. Look at that. It was on one of my fields. So I created this one on accounts. Sorry for that flub. So I made this if user ID equals created by ID, so we're all set. So let's look at our accounts. Burlington Textiles Corporation, I made this equals true, right? And it equals true because I'm logged in as Mike, and Mike, me, referring to myself in the third person, which is strange, also created this. So we're running true. Now, let's look at Burlington Textiles as my logged in business associate, Mr. TJ. So here I'm logged in as Mr. TJ, and he goes to accounts, and maybe he looks up Burlington. And he goes to Burlington Textiles, and the formula field writes false. And it writes false because the running user, which is Mr. TJ, is not equal to the created by user, which is Mike Gerholdt. So from there, we can use that formula field to create a list view. And so I called it accounts I created, right? And let's take a look at what that list view looks like. So I called it accounts I created, filter on all accounts, filter by the field that we just created, which was the formula field. I made this. Operator equals true, right? Because we're writing the word true in there. Now I can run this and make it visible to all users so that anybody has access to that. So as Mr. TJ, he can see the accounts he created. So he created Cats R Us and Yummy Pet Food. If we jump over and I log in and I click on accounts and I run that very same list view, accounts I created, just to show you there's no magic back here. All accounts, I made this equals true. Click save. And Mike has created way more accounts than Mr. TJ has. So that's using global variables to create a custom list view. Now let's change that formula field a little bit and actually make some useful reports. So for the last hack, we are going to report on records that were last modified by a running user. So in this case, the users need to report on all the contact records that they last modified, and the report should look the same and be built by the admin, right? So this is one way for us to roll out a report that can be used by any user. Now, of course, we could, if we were a Salesforce admin or developer of an org that had maybe 15 or 20 users, we could create a report and filter on that created by user and then fill in that user's name. But if we're an admin or developer for an org with thousands of users, it would be really logistically difficult to roll this out. So our hack recipe for this is we're going to create one formula field, and we're going to use the formula below. And the formula below looks real similar to the one that we just had, except it's going to be an if statement that results in a number. So we're going to use the if and that global variable user ID equals, and then we're going to grab last modified by ID, which will be off the contact record. And then rather than saying true or false, we're actually just going to put a 1, or if it's not true, we're just going to leave it blank, and so we type in the word null, right? And then from there, we can use that formula field to create one report. So let's jump in and create that field and create the report. This time I'll go to the right object first. So we know we need to create a formula field, so I'm going to click on Setup. And we're going to, the business case was the users need to see all of the contacts they last modified. So we know we need that formula field on our contact object. So I'm going to click on Build and Customize, scroll down to Contacts, and then click on Fields. So I called the field I last modified this, and you can see the data type is number. So let's go ahead and click into this and click Edit, right? So we know what we're building here. Field label, I last modified this. And you can see our formula options are a little bit different from when it was a text, right? We're actually using the return type as a number. And I set the decimal places to 0 because we're only returning 1 or null. And here is the formula I inserted, but let's rebuild that. So let's see how we built that formula. So it's another if statement. So we're going to go over here to our functions, and I'm going to scroll down and find if and insert it. And we can see that ifs require a logical test, and our logical test is going to be user ID equals last modified by ID. So I'm going to highlight over that, click on Insert Field, go down to User, and find a user ID as our field to insert. User ID, insert. And our operator is going to be equal. And then from the contact record, we're going to grab last modified by ID. So I click on Insert Field, Contact, and scroll to last modified by ID, and insert. Now because we're returning a number, we're not going to write true or false, so the value for this is if it's true, we want Salesforce to put a 1, and if the value is false, we just want Salesforce to leave it blank, so we type the word null, which will leave it blank. And that's how we get to our formula. So I'm going to delete that second one because we only need 1. I rebuilt it for the demo purpose. Check syntax, and we're all green. Click Save. Of course, this is a field you could add to the page layout or not. You could keep it hidden. The list view will still work. If you do add it to the page layout, make sure you tell your users what the 1 and null mean so that they're familiar with it. So I last modified this is a field on our contacts. So let's go to Contacts. And I'm going to go back to Tim Barr. And I can see I last modified this equals 1. And it equals 1 because I'm logged in as Mike. And, oops, Windows in the way. And last modified was by me. So let's check this same formula field before we create a report as our business associate, Mr. TJ. So when Mr. TJ goes to Contacts and he clicks on Tim Barr, he can see I last modified this is blank, right? That was the null factor. And if he clicks on James Garfield, which was a contact that Mr. TJ created, because we're logged in as Mr. TJ, the last modified by was Mr. TJ, I last modified this equals 1. So now we can create a report on that. So let's go over to our reports. This is the payoff. I create a report, contacts I last modified. So I'm going to show you the report, and then we're going to rebuild the report. So I'm logged in as Mr. TJ, and James Garfield is the one contact he last created. And if I jump over and log in as Mike and click on reports, contacts I last modified, we can see there's quite a bit more. So let's go ahead and create that report since I cheated a little bit and had it built for me. So from the Reports tab, I click on New Report, and it's a contact report. So I'm going to open up the Accounts and Contacts folder and click on Contacts and Accounts and click Create. For show, I want to show all accounts, so I want to see everything. I also don't want to put a date range on here, so I'm going to blank out the date range. And I like how we've already got some fields in here. These work for me in this report, and there's a whole bunch of fields on contacts, right? So I'm going to actually make it easy on myself and use the quick find and type in I, which searches all the fields we created, and there's that custom field I created called I last modified this. So I definitely want that as a filter, so I click on it and drag it over to the Add Filters area. So I last modified this equals 1. And I click OK. Now, I also, because I'm filtering on this, want to add this to the report just to make sure that the report is right. So I'm also going to click and drag this to the report. This is an optional step. You don't have to do it. And I'm going to click Run Report. And that's simple. So now we can see all of the contacts I last created. Now, some really fun stuff we could do is we could clone this report and maybe add some custom date ranges. So users could run and see what were some of the contacts they last modified or last created yesterday or today or within the last week, right? So you could also constrict down the date ranges for that. So that's the report. Using global variables. Awesome stuff. Totally love them. That got us through the 5 hacks. We did it. We made it. We survived on the ship of hacks together. It was a short journey. It wasn't a 3-hour journey. But that's okay. So we have a survey. I want to know your feedback, which is very critical. So you can go to bit.ly/hackaway and tell us what you think of the webinar. Ooh, where'd my screen go? There we go. We've got upcoming stuff. So the Summer of Hacks is going on. And shout out for our people in London. We had an awesome time in New York, fabulous time in Bangalore. LA was great. London is tomorrow, or maybe it's today, because they're kind of in the future. But that's coming up. And Dreamforce, October 13th through the 16th. Fabulous time, lots of chances to learn more about hacks like this. We have a discount for you. So it's our $8.99 developer discount. You can use the code D14DVLPR to sign up. Highly suggest you going. That's actually where I learned all of these hacks from Salesforce community members like Michael Farrington and Jared Kingston. And I can't forget the last hack was the power of one, which if you go to Dreamforce, you'll definitely get to meet Steve Mollis. It's actually his hack and his idea. So big shout out to the community for helping with the webinar. We also have resources. So I mentioned Michael Farrington and Jared Kingston did an incredible job with a Salesforce Admin Hacks series that's posted. There's a couple of YouTube videos, and they also blogged about it. So there's a ton more hacks than the 5 that I just showed you. These are the 5 that I really like, kind of get your feet wet into doing a little bit of Salesforce URL and formula hacking. And guess what? We made it all the way to Q&A. So my Twitter is @Mike Gerholdt. My email is mgerholdt@salesforce.com. Of course, we have a ButtonClickAdmin community that you can visit, post questions to. There's a lot of super smart admins on there, which is bit.ly/learn-to-hack-it. And there's also a developer forum. So same URL, just a little bit different, dev forum QA. All right, questions. So the first question is, new admin here, can you explain the difference between a hack and a non-hack? Okay, kind of. So a hack and a non-hack is best described as some of the URL stuff that we did, where we were converting a lead without creating an opportunity. We're actually just using URL to pass the values through. By doing that, it works really, really great for people who are at their desk, right? So we're hacking the URL and passing values through a URL as opposed to putting values into the record, right? So a non-hack for that would actually be having a Salesforce developer write us some Apex code that replaces that and could actually be deployed on Salesforce One. I don't understand the business case for the first hack. We didn't add any new functionality. The user already had the checkbox available, nor avoid the create opportunity. He can still edit the checkbox. Yep. So let me explain the business case for the first hack. It actually came from a company I used to work for. We didn't actually add functionality. You're right. You caught us. But what we did is check the box. So despite having the mandate that when you converted leads, you could not create opportunities, users get in a hurry and they forget to check the box. So automatically checking that box for them ensures that the new opportunities wouldn't be created. So we actually needed opportunities created from an account. We had an entire team of people that were devoted to qualifying leads and converting leads, but actually not creating the opportunity. So it's a little bit of a hack in that we're passing the value through to check the box, but we're actually adding functionality that they don't have to think about, right? So they don't have to worry, am I supposed to be converting leads and creating opportunities, or am I not? New admin here. Can you explain the hack, not hack? Oh, so the first hack, yes. Many of these aren't supported and could break, right? So anytime you do a URL hack, and in fact, the case in point is the left voicemail hack. I actually saw that on a webinar maybe a year and a half ago and had to adjust it. So anytime you're doing a URL hack, you can definitely say this could work. It's one of the things you're going to want to test when Salesforce has a new upgrade in terms of a release, and anytime a URL structure changes. So the morphing fields, yep, on opportunities, right? So there's a lot of page layouts and a lot of things to keep in sync and move and delete fields. So basically, the example I used was morphing page layouts, creating a lot of record types, and creating a lot of stages on the opportunity. That's a lot of things to keep in sync. So you're absolutely right. It works for some businesses. I use the extreme case of 10 steps for the opportunity, just to show you it could be done. Generally works a little bit easier, and from an admin perspective is easier to maintain if you have fewer steps. So if you're around 5 to 7 sales stages, it's a little bit easier to maintain. But you're right, there's a lot of workflows going on. There's a lot of record types going on, a lot of page layouts to manage. So what happens when the user skips stages? Is that allowed, or you get stuck at the pop-up until the populate? So this is good. So for the second hack, which was the opportunity of page layouts morphing, the way that we set it up and the way that I set it up was it only changed the record type based on the stage. So the person could go forward and could go backward in terms of the sales stages. And basically, if they go forward, obviously we're serving up new fields on the page layout. If they go backward, that field just disappears until they move back forward on it again. So I think that's one of the things you'll want to sit down and talk to management and your executive team is, should sales stages be exclusive, right? Are we only moving forward, or can a sales stage move backward? And if that's the case, then you'll want to adjust your sales process so that sales stages can't go backward. But as we move backward in the sales stages, essentially, if you think of a page layout like a window, we're pulling the blind closed so that user doesn't have the opportunity to edit that field anymore. Opportunity page layout. How could this be done if the user goes backwards, or backwards in some stages and only forwards in others? So that's a good question. This could be, so for this particular hack, I only set up one sales process. Salesforce allows you to have multiple processes, and you'd actually have to set up multiple sales processes in order to do that. I think it would be another case of what I did is lock the fields if they're moving forward. You could also change the page layouts, right? So if they're moving forward on, say, the first 3 stages, and then potentially when they get to stage 4, they might have to move backward, we could also add those fields, right? So that way, if they move back to 3, they're served up both fields on the page layout. I think that would be a good way to edit those. And let's see, I listed several IDs for several fields. If I also wanted to set the task type with the same button, what ID would I use? So, awesome. There was a link at the bottom of the slide that I can definitely tweet out, or I will get posted to the Q&A. There was a Salesforce community member that completely documented all of the task field IDs, and it was just too big to fit on a slide. It kind of turned the slide into a word chart, so I only showed the relevant ones. But that URL, you could definitely add field IDs to it, and they have a link to all of them. So we'll be sure to get that one sent out. So the left voicemail button will close a current task and create a new one that is a follow-up. That's correct, yep. Or just creates a new follow-up task. Sorry, your screen froze, darn it. So it actually creates a task and then creates a follow-up to that very same task. So it does not create a new one, right? It's from that same link. And let's see, why did you use a 1 instead of a true for this formula? So I think we're talking about hacks 4 and 5. If so, can you do math in the reports, and then why didn't you use the same for the example? So for hack 4, I actually used the if statement and then returned the word true or false, and then for the second hack, I used basically the same statement, if, except I returned a number, 1 and 0. And I did that simply for demonstration purposes to show you that you could return a word or you could return a number, right? That's the beauty of formula fields. You could also run the report and just summarize the number. The power of 1 is kind of neat because then the user doesn't have to remember true. You don't run into any mistypings where they could type in T-U-R-E instead of T-R-U-E. All they have to remember is 1. So the reason I used 1 for the last hack was just simply making it easier to create the report. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take one last question. On the opportunity record types, can the user skip over a stage, advance the opportunity 3 stages forward, for example? So the way that I built that hack, yes, because all we're doing is running the workflow based on the stage. So the user could move ahead. 3, one thing to keep in mind is, in my business case, it was required that the previous stages be locked. So if the user moved ahead 3, there would be 3 fields that weren't populated. And working with your sales team and sales management, If they're asking for a field to be populated, you definitely want to make sure that the user has that opportunity to populate the field. So if they're moving ahead by 3 stages, those 3 could be blank. So with that, this was awesome. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and tweet at me if you have any questions.